This was a prophet, a false prophet, some 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Why did they stone him? He made a mistake, probably. To the ancient Hebrews, a prophet was not his own man, he was God's man. To the ancient Hebrews, a prophet was a man believed to have been chosen by God, whose lips articulated the words of the source and power of the entire universe, whose eyes could foresee with uncanny accuracy events that would occur in years, sometimes centuries, to come. This poor fellow didn't make it, so he was stoned, the customary punishment for false prophets in those days. As a prophet, he may have been sincere. Most of the time, he was probably quite accurate, but to the ancient Hebrews, there was no room for error. A true prophet had to be accurate all the time. The early Hebrew kings were little more than nomadic tribal chieftains living in tents. They never created great pyramids like the pharaohs, or wonders like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, or merchant fleets like the Phoenicians, or art like the ancient Greeks. No, what the Hebrews did do was to compile a collection of histories and prophecies that have influenced more people on this planet than any other book ever written. Archaeologists and historians confirmed Jeremiah. Precisely as predicted, the Babylonians swept into Jerusalem and destroyed it. Those who survived were carried off to Babylon, where they remained for exactly 70 years. Of Babylon, one of the most powerful kingdoms of the ancient world, nothing remains. At a time when Babylon was considered impregnable to attack, the prophet Isaiah saw its total destruction by the Medes and Persians 150 years before it happened. Isaiah had also predicted that the first temple of Jerusalem, the one built by Solomon, would be destroyed by invaders. It was. He further predicted that a king named Cyrus would see to it that Jerusalem and its temples were rebuilt. Almost 200 years later, a king of Persia named Cyrus allowed his Jewish captives to return to the Holy Land and gave them the materials to rebuild their city and their temple. Jesus himself foresaw Jerusalem and its holy temple being destroyed a second time. The Roman legions fulfilled that prophecy in the year 70 AD. Jesus also predicted that the temple would be rebuilt for a third time on the same sacred site. Isaiah foretold of the Messiah, a man of sorrows, who would die beside criminals, and yet whose grave would be with the rich. 700 years after Isaiah's prophecy, Jesus was crucified between two thieves. And after his death, a man of wealth had him buried in his own tomb. Jesus, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Amos all predicted the destruction of the Jewish nation and the exile and persecution of its people. Their prophecies went so far as to foretell the restoration of the Jewish people as a nation. 3,000 years of history prove that the prophets of Israel spoke the truth. Not everyone wants to believe them. They cannot be ignored.